Hi,
Welcome back.
everyone.
Hey, welcome back. Welcome back to Unfiltered, Unspoken podcast. We told you we're going to continue to share life experiences. We have another amazing guest, Ashleigh. And as you know, she's going to come up and introduce herself. And then City Sid is going to kick off that first question.
Hi, I'm Ashleigh Barrie. I have a lot of life experiences, but right now I run a local music online publication called SLC Rock Renaissance out of Salt Lake City, Utah.
Well, thank you again for being here with us.
Thank you.
As we do, of course, as we do with all of our guests, we like to start off at the beginning of your journey. So tell us a little bit about your, home situation growing up, home structure, if you experienced any trauma in those years.
So I was adopted from birth. My birth mom never held me. I was immediately handed off to adoption agency reps, and then spent my first 3 weeks in 7 different foster homes in 3 different states before I was actually adopted. I grew up in Massachusetts, and when I was 12, almost 13, we moved to north of San Francisco, so all the way across the country. And my dad was pretty much a textbook narcissist. My mom did her best. But a lot of times I was kind of left to handle everything on my own. I have a sister who's 2.5 years younger than me, who was adopted from a different family. And she was always like a very needy, clingy kind of kid. And so my parents kind of focused on her and like let me do my own thing. That's like pretty much my childhood up until I was a teenager, which is a whole separate thing.
Okay. So, I want to go back to the child, and then we'll go up. As a child, feeling neglected, and the focus is on your other sister, how did that make you feel?
As an adopted kid, it definitely like played into that. In terms of like, well, nobody really wants me, nobody really wants me around. Luckily, I had some really incredible like adult figures in my life and mentors and things like that, that kind of helped me get through my childhood. I was in my neighborhood in Massachusetts. It was very much a village. There were 6 families that all had kids, and then the rest of the neighborhood was primarily retired couples. So like the grandparents of the neighborhood. And so as kids, most of us just ran around the neighborhood, like come home when the lights come on kind of thing. But we always had a lot of adults who were looking out for us, and ones who really helped like shape my natural skills and talent, especially when it came to reading and language.
And what were your, I guess, outlets at that time? How were you able to, kind of shake the feeling you were having of being on the outside? What were things that did actually kind of bring you joy?
So art has always been a really big thing for me. Lately I do more graphic design kind of stuff and website design. Um, Rather than like I started with watercolor when I was like 5 or 6 because somebody gave me a kit for my birthday. Um, and so I really got into that for a while, but I also played flute for my entire childhood. So I had music as well. Um, those were pretty much the big ones. And then I was also an athlete my whole childhood. I primarily was in competitive swimming and softball, and those I also played from before kindergarten all the way into high school.
And then so did you I want to ask being adopted because we've run across a few adopted kids. Did you ever have a bond with your adoptive parents? And I guess what is the relationship like now?
So with my adoptive mom, I had a great relationship. My dad was always he's a textbook narcissist. So a lot of his interactions with me were very critical. One of my favorite quotes from him was, "Well, why didn't you get an A even when it was like an A minus?" Um, because like unless it was full points, it wasn't good enough for him, which is part of why sports became so valuable to me, is because my coaches actually saw like value and potential in me and really helped me hone that, and put their own time and effort and energy into making sure that I had that outlet because it was something that I was naturally really good at. Um, so I had a good relationship with my mom, um, and then not really my dad. And my adoptive dad passed away when I was 7, I think it was, before I could ever meet him. I connected and met my birth mom when I was 23. So for a while, I had both adoptive parents and then my birth mom in my life, but both of my moms have since passed away. My adoptive mom in 2013 and my birth mom just last September. And I'm no contact with my dad now, so I don't really have parents or connections with any of them.
Um, what specifically, or what type of art did you really concentrate on, or that you were actually really good at? And I guess why did you connect to that avenue of art?
And I still am kind of all over the place. As long as I'm creating something, I'm happy and content. Like I said, now I do more online graphic design kind of stuff, but it started with painting, watercolors, then acrylics, but then I really got into drawing. Um, with either mostly just with pencil because I could, draw on whatever paper I had during classes and stuff to help me pay attention because I have ADHD. I'm also high functioning autistic. And so having something like that I can focus my brain on helped me listen and retain information a lot better. Um, but yeah, I'm kind of all over the place. Like I've gotten into crochet, like sculpture stuff, uh, like clay sculpting, really any kind of creative like any kind of creativity is an outlet for me. My favorite thing right now is so I did scrapbooking for quite a while as a kid because I was raised Mormon, and that's just one of the things they do. But I got really into scrapbooking for a while, and then once I started working with SLC Rock Renaissance and I was collecting all of this like memorabilia and like ticket stubs and all kinds of stuff, I started collaging those into like big frames. So my whole living room is just covered with all of my memorabilia kind of collaged as giant scrapbook pages.
Now, is that a part of the autistic piece, the collecting the art? Was that like an escape from everything to go to art?
Yeah, it definitely was. And one thing that like one tool that a lot of people use for pretty much any type of neurodivergence is like we're always the kids who are told like we need to pay attention because we're, doodling in our books or whatever or like fidgeting with something. That actually helps us listen better, like stay on topic mentally and like hear lectures and things like that and actually be able to retain that information. Um a good example is like I always have to have music on when I'm driving because it takes that, detached kind of all over the place part of my brain and focuses it on one thing. So then I can focus on, the main part of my brain on driving, which is obviously really important. You want to be able to pay attention to the road, but like that's like a pretty well known tool for neurodivergent kids. But I have noticed like when I was growing up, like all of the ADHD or autistic kids were always the ones drawing or like messing around with something.
And were these diagnoses things that you discovered, in adulthood, or did you know kind of back then what was going on as well?
That's a really good question. As a lot of women run into, I actually wasn't formally diagnosed until I was 23, and nobody really suspected it in me because um I have a trait that expresses very differently in me than most people. But it's a trait that's pretty much exclusively associated with autism, and that's hyperlexia. I learned how to read when I was 2.5. No one ever taught me, like, no one taught me letter sounds or anything like that, or like sounding out words. I was listening, and hyperlexia often comes with photographic memory. So I remember this moment. I was sitting under my dining room table wearing pink corduroy overalls, listening to a book on tape that was a Sesame Street one, and I had the book in front of me. And I just happened to be looking at a word as it was said on the tape. And then, like, every word in the book just kind of clicked for me. So I was always a very advanced reader until a few years ago. I was reading about 200 books a year, like my whole life. Um, and that's something that a lot of the adults in my neighborhood really encouraged. They gave me books that were advanced for most kids my age, but like they were things that were like age appropriate, but also challenging for me growing up. Um, and then they'd always want to like discuss the books that they gave me. And so I had a lot of, I guess, adult encouragement outside of my family, but I definitely did have quite a lot of it.
And I want to ask, with the autism and ADHD, did that cause any behavioral issues?
Um, Not really. Like, I was always a very like perfect student. I was always, because I like doing work. Um, like the the act of completion gives me that dopamine fix that a lot of neurodivergents seek. And so like I'd always be doing extra credit, I'd always get my homework done early or like on time. Most times when we were given a book to read as a class, I'd finish it before the end of the day with that we were given it. And then I'd have to reread each chapter as it was assigned so I could remind myself what happened and so I didn't like jump ahead in discussions. Um, but I was always a really good student, so nobody ever suspected that I was autistic. But I was always the kid who was sitting in the corner reading while listening to adults have conversations instead of outside playing with all the other kids. Um, like I there were definitely signs, but they weren't really the type of signs that people were taught to look for back then, like in the early 90s.
Now, outside of academically, how else did that affect you? Possibly socially, with friends or family, or with being able to explain yourself, certain situations, confrontation. Like, how did that really affect you outside of schoolwork?
I was definitely a very emotional kid. Um, and so I'd have overreactions to certain things that most kids would kind of just brush off, but it like mattered to me. Um, One of the biggest things is, especially when I was really little, and this is where my adoption abandonment issues come in. I would always be terrified when anybody had a helium balloon outside. Like, it didn't have to be me, it could be other kids, and I'd be panicking, especially if that balloon ended up flying away. Like, I would freak out about balloons to the point that when my kids were younger, I just wouldn't ever make a big deal about them. Like, I wouldn't draw their attention to them. I wouldn't really go like out of my way to get them for them unless they specifically asked. Just because I was like, I know that anxiety is there still. Um, but yeah, there were like I would have like big reactions to things, but also one thing that's written on like all my schoolwork and all my like school paperwork all the way through high school is I have trouble interacting with other kids. And a big part of that I think was the intelligence and the fact that like I wasn't having conversations like most kids my age. Like I wanted to discuss like philosophy and things like that, um, which kids my age didn't really understand. And so there was like I had much better connections and closer friendships with my teammates than I ever did with like other kids in school.
And I was going to ask, being a being an emotional kid that caused issues in school with other people. You said you didn't interact with them a lot, so did that cause bonding?
I can't really remember a lot of times that it was like that I had really consequences or that I like really overreacted at school. I would also most of the time like I would like something would happen at school and I just ignore it until the end of the day and then I'd have my freak out and breakdown with my mom or something like alone. Um so that didn't really get in the way of like interacting with other kids, luckily. My daughter also has ADHD and autism, and that has been a really big struggle for her. She is extremely emotional. She has a really hard time with emotional regulation, which she's 12 now. And in the last year or two, she's gotten a lot better with it. But when she was younger, it was really, really difficult. Like we had to have like she's had an IEP basically since preschool. And her biggest part of that is being able to say, I'm overstimulated, I need a break. And her teacher's allowing her to like step away from the group for like 10 or 15 minutes so she can like regulate herself.
And with that being said, how did your own issues affect being a parent, or how did being a parent affect those issues with routines and just little things that might make you stagnant or incapacitated or apathetic to certain things. How did that really kind of affect you full circle?
I've found that growing up and like learn having to learn how to manage my own symptoms and issues has been really good for both of my kids. My son just has ADHD, my daughter has ADHD and autism. But one thing that's really worked, like from the time she was like 2.5-ish, it has been a thing where she can go to her teachers and say, I need a break. Like, especially when she was really young, that was her biggest, like the only way that she could say, like, I'm overstimulated, like this is too much. Um, and actually like figuring out that that was something that worked for her and working with her teachers to make sure that she was given those opportunities when she asked for a break. And oddly enough, her breaks basically were art breaks. She's my artist, my son is my musician. And so art is also an outlet for her. And she's always doing like right now masks, uh like the like paper mache masks that they decorate. That's a big thing for her. But she's also gone through periods where it's like paper dolls or just drawing or like she's always making something. And that's always been a really good outlet for her since she was really little. And so like I think being able to like almost like needing to figure things out myself as I grew up made it a lot easier for me to teach my kids the things that worked for me and figure out how to adapt my tools in ways that help them more. So where, I wasn't diagnosed till I was 33 and never had, any kind of accommodations or anything like that. I just had to figure things out. Like it's made me a really good advocate for my kids because I know what they need and how to ask for it.
And I want to ask real quick. I want to go back to the balloons real quick.
Yeah.
Why do you think you had such? Why do you think you have such a reaction to balloons?
Well, it was definitely like it played into my abandonment issues from adoption. And I think that's kind of where it stemmed from. Where a lot of kids were like a lot of adopted kids will get afraid of like their parents going away and not seeing them again or like losing people in their life. That was just one of the ways that abandonment issues manifested for me. Like I've always had, and I'm kind of surprised I haven't turned into a hoarder at some point, because I do have strong connections to like sentimental items and things like that. But I was only 2 or 3, and I think that the balloons just happened to be like a physical and visual representation of those fears, and that would bring out those fears the most, I guess.
And with having your kids, um, how were you able to navigate, like romantic relationships? Did it lead you down a path of, wrong choices in partners? Did it lead you to be more kind of investigative to who they were, like to actually kind of see through words and have we tend to have better kind of pattern recognition? How did that work for you in a romantic partner sense?
So I've only had 3 long-term relationships, and not really any short-term anything, my entire adult life from when I was 18. So from 18 to 23, I was with my son's dad. And then from 23 to 28, I was with my daughter's dad, and I've been with my husband since I was 29. I'm 39 now. So this summer will be our 10-year anniversary. Actually, today is our 6th wedding anniversary. Um, so at first, my relationship with my son's dad was extremely like abusive. There was a lot of domestic violence. And I think a big part of that wasn't so much my childhood, but when I was 16, my parents had me taken by a transportation company by people who I'd never seen before, put on a plane, flown to Utah, and then dumped in the middle of the West Desert with a tarp and a pair of Walmart hiking boots, basically. And this was on December 22nd. And then I spent the next 12 days stuck in a blizzard where we ran out of food, ran out of water. Like we all thought we were going to die. Um, and it was a wilderness program, but like nobody ever told me where I was going or what was happening until I got out into the wilderness. And then after that, I spent 5 weeks in that program. And then I was sent to a therapeutic boarding school that was more like a girls' compound kind of thing. We had cabins that we lived in, but there was a lot of like constant, if we weren't working out or doing like some kind of like repetitive body motion kind of stuff, like running laps or jumping jacks, like we were always doing running laps, especially for punishment. Um, if we weren't doing that, then we were doing some kind of hard labor, like moving massive piles of horse manure across the entire campus in the middle of the night in the winter. Like everything was basically focused around like punishment as a way to like break you and then like teach you how to be a good person. Which the troubled teen industry is it's not a good thing, but it monetizes and basically promises parents, hey, whatever problem you're having with your kid right now, like we can fix it for you. But it also involves like a lot of abuse and neglect and things like that. Like the whole time I was there, we were on an 800 calorie a day diet while doing hard labor and heavy exercise, like constantly. Um, and then when I ran away from that program when I was 18, and then I spent 2 years homeless, hitchhiking the West Coast because I was afraid that someone was going to come find me and take me back. And I met my son's dad during that time after I ran away, and he was basically like the closest thing to like protection and consistency that I had after, those 2.5 years or so. And then on top of the fact that my adoptive parents, who promised me my entire life, oh, we're not going to abandon you like your birth parents did, like we're never going to do that. But then they did that. And so I think that mostly, and it's common with troubled teen industry survivors that especially the first relationship out of your programs, like it's almost guaranteed to be abusive because like that's all you know. Um, and so that's how I ended up with my son's dad. But I think it was more related to those experiences than adoption and abandonment.
Hold on. First, I want to ask, does that program still exist?
Mine doesn't know, but there are plenty all over the country still.
Did they like get rid of it? Did they deem that as some form of abuse?
Um, in the last couple years, I'd say like 3 years or so, um, Paris Hilton went to a bunch of those programs. And she started speaking out about her experiences about 4 years ago. And that really brought a lot of attention to basically this. Survivors have been trying to make some kind of difference in changing these programs or outlawing them or making them illegal or even just getting people to see that they're abusive at all. Because most people hear, oh, you went to an abusive teen program and you think it was abusive, so that must be mean that you're not like that you're still a bad kid or whatever. Um, but when Paris Hilton started talking about it, people actually started paying attention to like the legal battles that people were had been fighting for decades. Um, she worked with one of our state senators in Utah to basically overhaul the entire like legal like regulations and stuff that oversee and govern a lot of these places. And she put a lot of like very specific things in there, like repetitive motion cannot be used for punishment, like running laps and doing jumping jacks and things like that. um and they put a lot of very specific stuff in it. Now she's trying to do that on a more federal level. um but and people give her a bad rap a lot of times, like even other survivors. But I'm of the belief that like without her, like people still wouldn't know that these places ever existed. And like now programs are getting shut down because laws are changing. And a big part of that is her work. Um, so it's a very slow process, but like Utah still has, 100 or more like programs across the state, between wilderness programs and like therapeutic residential programs. Uh, Texas has quite a few still, Florida. Um, and those are the top three states for deaths in programs. Like kids who've died is Texas, then Utah, then Florida. Um, and it's like I said, it's a very slow process, but it's one that has definitely picked up speed and momentum in the last few years, which I hope it continues to.
Can I ask, why did your parents send you there? Why did they do that to you?
Because I got caught drinking and smoking weed, because I was being groomed by a 19, when I was 14, I was being groomed by a 19-year-old who basically took advantage of my lack of relationship with my dad and my abandonment issues. Um, and my parents saw that as I'm acting out and I'm, going out and having sex and doing drugs. Um, when really and this is a big thing that I always say, like I have a website and a YouTube and stuff that I started because I was doing activism about this stuff for a while. But I called it Traumatized, Not Troubled. And kids that act out, I think a lot of times they do that because they have or have experienced something traumatic or multiple things, and they have no outlet. They have no idea how to handle it. And so they do start doing things like self-medicating, um, and running away and things like that, trying to avoid the problems at home that are causing them to feel whatever way they are. Um, and so I think like a lot of kids that I knew got sent for literally like just smoking weed or drinking, like things that normal teenagers do, like especially where I lived in Northern California. And that's an area of the country where, like most kids will start experimenting with alcohol, especially in the 90s and 2000s, in high school. But in Northern California, it's mostly weed over alcohol, just because of like it's more socially acceptable, I guess, there, especially now that it's, recreational. Um, but I wasn't as bad as most of the kids that I went to school with, but my parents were always very strict. And so at like all of that behavior, they blamed on just me acting out like I was like trying to make them mad or whatever. When really it was I'm being groomed by an adult um who is forcing me to do things that I know I shouldn't be doing and don't want to be doing, as well as trying to self-medicate to avoid that, plus everything else that was going on at home. Um, and I think it's important, especially for parents who have kids who are acting out. I think it's important to give that kid, and I do this with my kids too. Like my whole friend group is like aunts and uncles to my kids. My kids have their phone numbers. They can, go hang out with them when they want to. Like if they and really I think I know that my kids aren't going to always be able to come to me or my husband as their parents and say, "Hey, I'm having a problem, I need help." Because I've been a kid and I've definitely had things that I didn't feel like I could talk to my parents about. And so I've given my kids a network of safe adults who I can trust to give them the same advice I would, but in a place where my kids feel safe to receive it.
And you did mention that you were brought up in a Mormon household. Um, how did that affect your mind frame or your upbringing, or what have may have led you to go down certain roads and paths? How did that kind of affect your upbringing and ideals and things like that?
So, interestingly enough, and this is actually a big reason why I think I was able to get through my boarding school, is because I never believed anything. Like, I'm very much, my adopted dad is a research physician at the genetic level. So, he does basically genetic research on lung diseases. So, he's very, evidence based, like, I want to see proof kind of person. And so that didn't really play out very well for me when it came to religion, because this is what happened and this is what you need to believe, and like just don't ask questions. Most kids in the Mormon church get baptized at 8. I was 9.5 because it took me a year and a half to figure out that if I just gave them the answers that they were looking for and stopped asking questions, then I didn't have to have weekly meetings with my bishop anymore about, they were basically just trying to brainwash me into believing what they believe. And I never really fell for it. Um, and my dad was raised Catholic, but then very much through his scientific career became more of an atheist. My mom was more of what they call a Jack Mormon. So she drank alcohol, she drank coffee. Um, we didn't live in Utah, but my mom's whole family did. I was one of 22 grandkids of my grandparents. Um, and so I had a lot of cousins, and all of those cousins lived in Utah. And so every time I'd see them or visit them, their biggest thing was always like, "Oh, well, you need to get into the church so you can marry a nice Mormon boy and like have a good life and everything." And I kind of find it funny that those same cousins that really tried to push that hardest on me are actually the ones who are now divorced. Um, which I've always found kind of interesting. But I think it's just an example of what can happen when you don't ask questions and when you blindly follow whatever you're told to follow, and then you come to a realization that that's not necessarily reality and that's not what life really is. And there's definitely a lot of like existential crisis, I think, that comes for a lot of people who are raised not just in the LDS church, but really like in any kind of like religious system where religion is the core of it. Um, and it's like the Bible and what the Bible says comes first among everything, rather than encouraging people to have life experiences and learn things like through getting through them themselves.
Did you say your dad was an atheist?
He is now, yes.
S- Is it this your biological dad?
No, this is my adoptive dad. So my mom was LDS and her whole family was. My
Okay.
dad is the only child. My mom was the oldest of six. So we didn't really have family on my dad's side. And my dad didn't really have a care in terms of what religion me and my sister were raised in. So we went to church with my mom. Um, but like we really only went consistently probably from when I was born until till we moved basically till I was 12.
Okay.
And then
So
we
I
just
want
stopped going.
yeah. So I want to ask with the different cultures and having a dad that's an atheist, how did that play a part in your life?
I think it's part my nature, but I think it's also part like being raised in a scientific lab, um where everything is based on proof and evidence. Uh because when I was growing up, my dad worked at Brigham and Women's Hospital in Boston, and my mom worked at Beth Israel, which was right across the street. And so I basically grew up in the halls of those two hospitals. Um, and I very quickly learned from my dad not to just blindly believe things, but to ask for evidence, to seek information before making a decision. And I think that played into a lot when it comes to my willingness to just blindly believe something without looking for the information myself and learning from my own experiences.
In just regarding our title here, uncovering family and facing pain, what part of that whole process was most painful for you? What was most significant, to your discoveries, to your investigations about everything?
Um, I really think the I have done a lot of work on my own because of my experiences in the troubled teen industry, and a lot of us survivors are like this, but we can't do traditional therapy. Like just the act of walking into a therapist's office and sitting down on a couch to talk to somebody is like one of the most triggering things for our PTSD with that. So we can't do traditional therapy. So I've learned how to like heal and work through a lot of my trauma on my own, but the one thing that I just like I can't go anywhere with is the troubled teen stuff. It's the one thing that I still have nightmares about. uh like the one thing that like still comes up randomly in my life when I'm least expecting it. Like most of my other trauma doesn't do that anymore because I've worked through it, but this is just like I can't do it. It's one of those lifelong kind of things.
And I want to go into, oh my gosh, I didn't even know this was going to go this way, Ashley. Um, um, so you run away from, of course, it's an abusive situation going on.
Yeah.
That's like child labor and abuse
Hmm.
mixed all in one. So you
Yeah.
leave the situation and you get into a relationship with your first child's dad. Can you talk a little bit about that and how the abuse started?
So with him, he was one of the first people I met when I was homeless after I ran away from my program, which I technically didn't run away from the program. I ran away from home the first time they let me go home. I was supposed to be home for 2 weeks, and like the first night I was home, I ran away. And he was one of the first people I'd met, and he was pretty much the most consistent person I'd had in my life in years. Um, but also like when you're living homeless, especially when you're hitchhiking and stuff as a woman, it's almost like it's stupid basically to try to do that on your own. So you will almost always like connect with either a person and get into a relationship, or like a group. Like I knew a couple groups of like 2 or 3 girls who would kind of stick together, but most people I knew would get into relationships because that's the easiest way to stay safe while you're hitchhiking and sleeping outdoors and all things like that. Um, but we did that for about a year and a half, and then my I called my mom at one point, and she kept begging me to come home, so that she'd know I was safe and everything. And so finally I gave in, and he and I kind of, from then on, we weren't homeless, but like we'd still hitchhike, we'd still hang out in all those same places. Ultimately we ended up on our own, with our own apartment. Um, but the abuse didn't really start until we'd moved into our first apartment. Like I think it was like 2.5 years after we met. A lot of it had been verbal up until that point, but that was the first time that it got physical. And the last time was when my son was a baby, and we got in a horrendous, like he'd been drinking. When I met him, he would drink maybe 2 40s a day, but by the time that I kicked him out, he was drinking 9 or 10 a day from the second he woke up till the second he'd passed out. And most of the time he was in a blackout state. So he had no idea what was going on or what he was doing. He was just angry and violent. Um, and so I kicked him out. And then I actually ended up living with my parents from basically then until my till my mom passed away. Um, but it was, I don't know. My experience with domestic violence is pretty similar, I think, to most women. I went back more times than I should have. Again, because he was the most consistent and the safest person that I had. Uh, because it was either getting judgment and criticism from my dad or dealing with him. And at least sometimes he'd act loving. Uh, but after that, like I definitely learned a lot. My son's dad, or my daughter's dad, um, I just like to say that like we ended up growing in different directions, but also I like to say that he's an amazing father, but he's a shitty husband. And some people are just like that. Like they don't understand how to have healthy relationships. Um, and I got fed up with trying to teach that. Um, but we have one of the best co-parenting relationships I think that anybody could have. We get along really well. He gets along with my husband. Like the two of them actually deal with all the kids' school registration and everything like that. Like I don't have to do any of that. Um, so I guess as I've gotten older, I've learned a lot from every relationship I've been in, and each one has been like drastically better than the last.
Um, when you were away at the boarding school, or the what you said, like wilderness
Mhm.
project, whatever that they want to refer that to, um, did you make any, I guess, lifelong friends? Just kind of being as though you guys are going through the same issues, and just naturally people tend to do that. Is there anyone that was in that situation with you that you still remain in contact with?
I have 2 girls from my boarding school who I'm still very close with, one more than the other. We all have kids now, and um, with one of them, her name's Jeannie. She and I talk at least a couple times a year, and we check in a lot with each other. She's a psychologist who wrote a workbook um, called "In the Hands of Assholes." That is a workbook for troubled teen survivors, to kind of work through that. And she had me write the foreword for that. So like we're still pretty close, but my closest friend is Nor, and we at least once a week or so will get on the phone and end up talking for like 3 or 4 or 5 hours. Um, because and I like to say like those two, like we've seen each other in literally the worst that life can get, and we've watched each other survive that. Um, and so like they've seen parts of me that nobody ever has or will again. Um, they have a very unique experience of me and who I am because they saw me like in that kind of setting. And it goes both ways too. Like when I'm dealing with a lot of the trauma and things are coming up, like I'll call Nora and be like, dude, I hate this. Like I can't handle this right now. Because one thing I learned from working with survivors and doing activism is that a lot of times, um, like I've introduced myself to survivors, and when I tell them that I'm also one, like they almost always cry because a lot of us after our programs, like we scatter, like we don't stay in contact with people who we went to the programs with. Like we don't do that. Um, so when you come across another one, it's like, oh my God, like you understand this all without me having to try to explain it and without trying to convince you that it was even abusive at all. Um, because you were there and you get it. And it's always very like comforting and grounding, I think, to come across like the first person that was another survivor that makes you realize that you're not the only one.
I wanted to ask, you said you hitchhiked for a year, over a year or so.
Mhm. Yeah.
Um, can you tell us how many states you hitchhiked to and what was one of the worst situations you were in while hitchhiking?
Um, so I really just hitchhiked the West Coast. So California, mostly Northern California, and then Oregon and a little bit into Washington. But my like home base was the coastal area between San Francisco and the northern border of California, which is mostly Humboldt County, and then Mendocino, Sonoma, and Marin County. That was kind of like where I spent most of my time. And that area has a like there's a culture within the homeless group. Like there's a very distinct split between long-term homeless people who live in the city or like have established themselves as like stationary homeless types. But then there are a lot of people from teenage up until like really up to any age, but the older you get, the less people that you'll see that age who are what they call traveling kids, who are the types who don't stay in one spot. They'll hitchhike around. Um, and like there were a lot of times like we had like 5 or 6 long-term friends from the whole time that we were homeless that we just kept running into in different cities. um there's this one kid, Sean. We Where did we meet him? We met him in Portland, Oregon, and then we'd run into him all the time, like all over Humboldt and San Francisco. um like we'd just run into him randomly, and so we'd always hang out and like camp together and stuff. um and actually he was part of probably one of the like I guess weirdest kind of experiences I had when I was homeless. Um, we were hanging out in actually the panhandle of Golden Gate Park, right across the street from Golden Gate Park. He had just hitchhiked down from Garberville, where he had worked on a marijuana grow, and so he had a bunch of weed and a bunch of money, and so he was like, "Hey, I'm bored. Let's go buy a bunch of scratch off tickets, and we can, just do that all night." And so we're sitting there scratching off tickets, and we hear some yelling across the street, and we look over. There's this guy who's trying to steal a woman's purse. And this kid that we weren't very close with him, but he was definitely like an established part of Golden Gate Park and the group around there. Um, he came up and tried to, stop this guy and ended up getting shot to death right across the street from us. And there's nothing we could do, but also it's part of the street code that when things like that happen, unless you want to be targeted next or looked at as a snitch, or there's a lot of bad that can come from like calling the police and reporting things. um and there was already someone who was calling police, obviously, who I think was like a little bit further up the sidewalk from them. And so we just left because we figured, okay, someone's called the cops. We don't need to be here. Um, and really part of that was also, keeping yourself safe. Um, like in that situation, I don't think people would have looked at it as like you're a snitch kind of person and we're going to retaliate and beat you up because of it. But that was kind of the like atmosphere when it came to that kind of stuff. Like if two homeless kids were fighting with each other, like everyone would just like turn around and walk away because you don't want to be seen as the person who snitched on somebody when you're part of that community.
Are there any only because earlier you said that, being as though you went down the road of trying different methods and things for yourself, as far as productivity and things like that goes. Is there anything that you've noticed that you maybe you feel negatively passed down to your kids, or that you're kind of hyper sensitive about with your kids, that that maybe you didn't receive as a child yourself, or that's something that you still struggle with?
And actually it's funny because a lot of troubled teen survivors kind of take this approach to their own parenting. Like we look at parenting as like we have no fucking clue what we're doing, but we're gonna do something different than what our parents did. As long as it's different, like it's gonna be better. And we were actually see a lot of success with that kind of approach. And so like my kids are like we don't have any issues. Like they do come to me and can come to me with pretty much anything, and anything that they can't, they have a network of my friends who they can and they feel safe doing that with. Um like I'm always the one every time one of my son's friends, he's 16, so every time one of his friends meets me, and they're always like, dude, you have the coolest mom. And it's just because like I think with one of my approaches, like because my parents were so critical and controlling of everything I did, like they didn't really want me to make mistakes and learn from them myself. Um, like I look at parenting as like your first and primary goal should be to make yourself the safest place on earth that your kids have. Everything else comes secondary. As long as you can build and maintain that with your kids, then they're probably going to be decent kids. Because they do feel safe to make mistakes. Um, but like my son, everyone always says like he's mentally, cognitively, emotionally, he's more of a early 20s kind of person than a teenager. Um, and a lot of that I think is like I've always been very real with my kids, and like they know about all of my experiences. They know about the troubled teen industry. My son knows about his dad. Like I don't try to hide things from them. I just try to give them truth and share my experiences with them so hopefully they can learn from, like here's a line that I probably shouldn't cross. Um but they also know that if they make mistakes, they're always like I'm never going to disown them um or ever like kick them out or distance myself from them based on any mistake they ever make. Um because they know that they're safe to make mistakes and there's always going to be a safe place to go back to.
I want to ask really quick. It's a two-in-one question, really quick. Um, do you think that a lot of kids that come up on the missing flyers are actually runaway kids? Some people deem them trafficked or kidnapped. But do you think there's a a balance of where some of those kids are runaways? And how do you and can you tell the audience, or speaking to a youth, how dangerous it is hitchhiking?
Um, so it is incredibly dangerous, and that was a big part of why I didn't often leave that one section of Northern California that I spent most of my time in, because there is a culture of hitchhiking there. And most of the time when you're getting rides, like most of my rides that I got were from like old school hippies who were in their like 60s, 70s, 80s, who did that when they were younger. Um, a lot of times they're also women. Um, and it was a safe area to do that because it was so common, but also the people who would pull over and pick people up were safe too. Um, a lot of, and I think when it comes to trafficking, especially for women, it kind of goes back to the reasons that I was with my son's dad is that when you're trafficked at first, they give you a type of stability and safety that you've never had before. Like, you know, a lot of those girls will run away and then realize they don't have the skills or the tools to be able to survive out there. And so they latch on to the first person that offers them a level of stability and safety that they don't have there. Um, and I think that's why people can be trafficked so easily is especially like when you're running from something, anything that's better than that is like the what you're gonna like gravitate to. And so when people who traffic, especially and when they use women especially, is like it's easier to trust an older woman and then get yourself it and then it that's it whole situation can go very bad very quickly. Um just because you trusted the wrong person. But I think part of it is that like I think the people that run away from bad home lives because that's usually what's happening is that they've never had that before and they don't really have experience in what trust is and the type of people you should trust. So they, you know, a lot of times they'll trust people they shouldn't just because they've been offered safety and consistency that they've never had before.
You want to go ahead into your last question, Demetri?
You're
Sorry.
muted.
Yeah,
Yep.
sorry. So we're almost at time. See how this hour just it goes so fast, and you have given so much knowledge, and I just hope that someone takes an abundance of your testimony. I would ask, what advice from your personal life experience would you give to a parent neglecting their child's needs?
I think the first most important thing is to recognize that your kids' needs aren't being met and that it is your responsibility to make sure they are. Um, because a lot of parents don't like like don't take on that responsibility when they become parents. And I think a big reason that people run into trouble when their kids become preteens and teenagers is they haven't cultivated that safe space of no matter what you do, no matter how you act, no matter what happens to you, you will always be safe with me. Um, and so when kids start running into adult types of problems when they're not adults, they don't have a safe place to go to. And so they will turn to acting out. Um, and so I think that the first step is to recognize that that's your responsibility is to make cultivate a safe environment for your kids to be able to make their own mistakes and learn from them while still being able to trust that they're not going to lose everything that they know just for making mistakes. And then I think from there, uh, I think parents don't ask for help as much as they should be. And it, you know, that could look like really anything, whether it's, you know, working with another parent to carpool your kids to and from school, just to take some stress off of you, or, you know, it's about building a village around that safe place so that your kids have basically like the safety net of when you can't fulfill a need, then you have access to people who can fill those needs for your kids. And then as the kids get older, they will turn to those places and those people on their own without asking for permission first. And I think that's really just what kids need most. And they need to be heard. Like, kids know a lot more than people give them credit for. They are a lot smarter and a lot more emotionally intelligent than a lot of adults. And so a lot of times just allowing your kids to talk, and speak their truth, and then helping them come up with a solution for what they're struggling with is like, that could mean like a world of difference. Just allowing your kids to have voices, especially when it comes to you, rather than being, I'm the parent, I know everything, you need to follow everything I say. It's working with your child and allowing them to give their perspective and their ideas. Uh, and, one of the biggest things is asking kids, what do you think you need? Like, what would help you? Because we do that a lot with other adults, but we never extend that to kids. And I think kids really need that. They need to be able to feel like they have a role and a purpose, in their own like healing and growth.
And as we do with all of our guests, we like to give you the chance to participate in shameless plug. So you do see all of your information scrolling across the bottom here. If any of our viewers have resonated with your story, maybe have some guidance or as a need or as a want from you, please let the viewers know how they can contact you. If there's anything, if they can contact you anyway, if there's anything that you want to draw traffic to, anything that you're advocating for, anything that you may have for sale, business aspects that you do personally, anything, you have the floor.
Um, like right now, in terms of like work and stuff, um, I have a huge passion for helping people create, like graphic design, whether it's website design or, promotional graphics or whatever that is, or logos, helping people create something that feels like it is expressive of who they are and what they want to, like, how they want to be seen, and viewed by their audiences. I also run on Instagram. I have SLC Rock Renaissance, which is really just focused around supporting local music, live music. It doesn't matter where you live or where you're from. Like, a lot of times, local music scenes are incredible communities of amazing creative people. So go out and support local music wherever you live. And yeah, you can contact me on Facebook or Instagram.
We want to thank you so much for sharing your testimony and just being honest about still having triggers, because a lot of people try to suppress it and they say, I'm healed, I'm not going through nothing. But a lot of people are still going through things and they're not honest about it. So I'm just thankful that you're able to say I'm still going through my challenges, and that is huge, really huge. We want to thank you for sharing your testimony on Unfiltered Unspoken podcast. It was an honor to have you as a guest. And I hope that someone takes something from your life experience, or you're able to help somebody that is going through a similar situation as you, because there are a lot of struggling teens out here and many of them are ignored.
Yeah, I agree. And thank you so much for having me.
It's a pleasure. We asked if you can hold just for a second as we wrap
Yeah.
things up. And we're going to continue to share life experiences. Ain't that right? See it.
That's right.
Yes. So make sure you like, share, and subscribe to Unfiltered, Unspoken podcast. I just was notified there's a podcast similar to ours, almost just the identical words. So I want to make sure that you're typing in Unfiltered, Unspoken podcast, and we're going to continue to share life experiences in hopes that someone can connect so that they can start their journey to heal. Please follow us on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and LinkedIn and YouTube at Unfiltered, Unspoken podcast. You'll see like a greenish U, or you'll see the logo total that says Unfiltered, Unspoken podcast. And we'll see you each and every Monday at 8 p.m. Peace.